Hello folks, for today's Where Winds Meet video, we are going to be breaking down every single difference between the current Chinese and global versions of the game. As some of you may or may not know, Where Winds Meet did release almost a whole year prior to the global release we had this year, with the Chinese version releasing on December 27th, 2024, whilst the Western release came this year on November 14th, 2025. Now, these versions are quite different from one another in terms of both content and the execution of certain mechanics. What we have is a range of differences to the microtransactions, social features, and various other bits and pieces here and there, which we'll be calling the core differences. And then beyond this, we have basically a year's worth of additional content released for the Chinese version that seemingly should be released for ourselves over the coming year or so. As a few quick side notes, just prior to release, the devs did come out and say that all future content for Where Winds Meet will be absolutely free, meaning all content shown inside of this video outside of the cosmetics will be free at some point in the future. And I also just wanted to say I do have a Where Winds Meet guild named We Are Waved. It's just a simple spot for solo or co-op inclined players to progress within a guild, and with time we will hopefully have some events, giveaways, etc. So do feel free to look us up in game and apply. Anyway, to start us off, we're going to quickfire through the core differences, and then the main bulk of this video will be regarding all of the additional content we can likely expect throughout 2026. So, first things first, I'd like to give a massive shout out to Whispers of the Wind. This channel is ran by a veteran Where Winds Meet player from the Chinese version of the game, so if you would like a very informed source of guide and news videos from a veteran Chinese player, then I highly recommend checking him out. I'm basically doing a very streamlined summary of his video right here, which you'll find linked below. So if you would like the actual details, then I recommend watching the entire thing. Now, as for the differences themselves, the first one of note here is the Swords Unseen draw event that recently had some controversy surrounding it. I covered this before, but basically this cosmetic set right here originally cost 2,580 pearls in the Chinese version, and there was no event, with this being just a straight purchase. However, in our own version, this set cannot be purchased, and instead you need to draw a maximum of 7 times to acquire each piece, and each purchase increases the price of the next by quite a large amount. The exact prices being 60, 180, 400, 800, 1,400, 2,000, and then a whopping 2,600, making the entire set basically triple its original price. And then, to make things even worse, unlike the Chinese version where this set is still available for purchase, for ourselves, this event is actually set to end very shortly. Now, Whispers of the Wind does have some theories as to why this may be the case, which I won't cover here, as I simply just want to borrow from his expertise on the differences and that's it. So again, I do highly recommend checking him out if you want the very nitty-gritty details. Beyond this, some of the current options we do have available for purchase within the store are currently available for a much longer period of time than they were in the Chinese version. And then the lingering melodies used for the current Celestial Echo draw event are separated into bound and unbound within the Chinese version, whilst in the global version they are merged into one, which essentially works out slightly cheaper and more consumer friendly for ourselves. That covers the main differences for the in-game store, but moving on to the social features, the first big one here would definitely be the inability to create our own Windtail Lounge. They can basically be looked at as chat rooms for Discord communities, streamers, or just places for players to hang out. But seemingly in the global version, we are unable to create these, and instead we're just given pre-made ones for certain instances, such as being part of a guild. The next big difference here would definitely be the removal of the cash shop trading system. Put simply, in the Chinese version, players can craft goods and then convert those goods into a currency which can then be used to acquire cosmetics. And this is essentially the core way of free-to-play players being able to access cosmetics they otherwise can't or won't purchase. A real shame we don't currently have this, as I know it would incentivize a much larger player base. Now beyond this, Whispers of the Wind does go on to mention a handful of other differences between the UI, quality of life, and even some content like the season rewards and shop, but again, I won't be covering them here. That does just about summarize the core differences that Whispers of the Wind has noticed so far, but of course beyond this, we do have a whole year's worth of content released in the Chinese version that we can absolutely expect over this coming year. To start us off, the first thing we're likely waiting for right now would be the Bolang Sands region, located right here in the top left corner of Kaifeng. And with it comes the Dragon King's Daughters boss fight, along with the Dragon King and River God boss fight too. Shortly after this, the final chapter of Kaifeng's main quest, Crucible of Righteousness, and the Black God of Avarice boss fight were added. And then just after this, the game received 3 additional world bosses, being the Nameless General, Coffin Master, and Drunken Fist. This content was released over the course of 5 or so days, but it's possible we may just receive this all in one big go. Of course, amongst it all, we will also receive an additional region to explore, with more story boss fights, side missions, oddities, world bosses, etc. And we can seemingly expect this quite soon, given this came within the first few weeks of the Chinese version releasing, and we are just now coming up on roughly 3 weeks ourselves. It's not to say we'll get an exact match on both timing or actual content added, but we can still hedge our bets quite a bit, and I myself am expecting these updates no later than the end of December. But who knows? Moving on, just a few days after this, the game received a New Year's update, featuring a festival, minigames, and additional cosmetics, and then following this, more of the same was added shortly after, with the inclusion of the bone shrinking technique, which is seemingly used to shrink ourselves down to then access areas we otherwise couldn't. And then we have more cosmetics ranging from outfits to weapon skins and martial arts effects. Now, after this, right through February, we have a fair few updates that bring further cosmetics. These can be obtained through a range of different ways. Some are free, some are straight purchases, etc. However, given what we know about the differences between both versions' cosmetic pricing, we shouldn't expect the same as the Chinese version, and should instead anticipate differences in how these cosmetics may be acquired, meaning it's likely some of these may be more expensive and or locked behind events or paywalls. Come March, the game receives another content update, being the Hexi region Yumen Pass, which also brought along some umbrella and rope dart martial arts, along with the Gao Jin boss fight and this other boss fight where seemingly we all fight a boat. This, of course, came with even more cosmetics, ranging from outfits, a weapon skin, hairstyles, and martial arts, which you will find to be pretty common throughout this entire video. One thing to bear in mind is when and how these cosmetics were first introduced. They have existed for quite some time now, and thus are much easier to implement a lot sooner into the global version of the game. And as I've previously said, there's nothing to suggest they will be acquired the same way you see them available here. At the beginning of April, the game received the Feng Ruzi boss fight, which I'd assume is for the Yumen Pass, and then throughout April, it received another range of cosmetics, from mystic skills to martial arts, outfits, headwear, etc. Now, May starts off with a ton of cosmetics, which we'll scroll through as I waffle on. These once again range from outfits, hairstyles, martial arts, etc. However, just after all of these cosmetics, in mid-May, the game received another content update, being the Liangzhou addition to the Hexi region, which also brought along the Wang Yu boss fight with it. This is, of course, followed up with even more cosmetics and another mount along the way. But then by the end of May, the game then received another boss fight, being Tian Lu, and as a massive fan of stags myself, I've got to say this is one I'm really excited for. As well as, of course, the boat. After this, we do indeed have even more cosmetics being added to the game, being outfits, martial arts effects, and a weapon skin, with this also taking us right through to June. At which point, this marks roughly 6 months after release for the Chinese version, and as you can see, it has already received quite a sizable amount of additional content. June starts off with some additional cosmetics, but more importantly, includes the main quest Liangzhou Ballad and Paper Moon. After this, we have a long list of additional cosmetics, ranging from outfits, accessories, mounts, and martial effects. However, come mid-June, the game does receive the 5 Cripples and Pocket Trickster boss fights. And then, of course, after this, we have some additional cosmetics to see the month through. This then takes us up to July, which begins with a lot of cosmetics, ranging from almost everything. We do have a lot of additions added here. However, as I scroll through, I will add that I have seen some of these cosmetics in the global version that weren't actually added to the Chinese version for months and months, which further reinforces that we could receive any of these cosmetics at any point from here on out. Amidst all of these cosmetics, however, the game also received a new weapon, being the Heng Dao, which I'm not very familiar with, but it appears to be a 1/2-handed sword. And then with this came the Raging Tide Sect, which is already in the global release version. After this, we have the usual range of cosmetics being added in, but right at the bottom here, we have the family business system being introduced, which I currently can't find much on, but it would appear to be some form of farming mechanic that we can hopefully look forward to. And then just after this, we have the usual outfits and additional hairstyle cosmetics. This then takes us through to August, which starts with additional cosmetic items, ranging from outfits to effects. But we also have the inclusion of the Heroic Realm, which is a 10-player boss fighting event, and if I'm not mistaken, is already a part of the game. I'm just yet to play it all that much, and am extremely unfamiliar with it. Then, mid-August, there are some additional cosmetic items, but right at the end of the month, the game receives the Qinshuan region, along with the Listening to Plum Blossoms and Snow boss fight, as well as, of course, a range of different cosmetic additions. September is almost exclusively just cosmetic additions being added to the game, ranging through the usual types, and I'm mainly just now saying words so as to fill up the time it takes me to gently scroll through these cosmetics. However, mid-September the game receives yet another region, being the Nameless Mountain, as well as receiving the Zhang Wanxi, Zixi Zixi, and Ironheart Centipede boss fights, as well as the Moshan Dao Sect. And then of course, around all of this, even more cosmetics. This then takes us up to October, and the first half of the month was absolutely loaded with cosmetic additions, which again I'll waffle slightly as we scroll through them steadily. They range from the usual outfits, effects and hairstyles, and again we can expect these in any order with the global release, and may not necessarily have to wait as long. Then, at the very end of the month, the Trap City Lake area was added, along with the Sheng Sheng Blue Lantern Knight and Fish Among Algae boss fights, which are some of the most recent bosses added. Now, this brings us right up to November this year, where our own global version of the game released, and with launch, the devs were still hard at work with new content for the Chinese version. At the beginning of November, the map 9 Mortal Ways base was released, along with the Masked Troop Sect. And then, of course, even more cosmetic additions. Mid-November is no different as far as cosmetics are concerned, but then just after this, the game received a new weapon, or rather lack of one, with the fist fighting style becoming available. This is then, of course, followed with a bunch more cosmetic additions, ranging from the usual suspects, right up until the end of the month, where the game received the ink structure technique, which I'll honestly need to do way more diving into before I say much, but it is about as fun as it looks. Now, this does bring us right up to this month, where the summary appears to be a little further ahead than time itself, likely down to previews already made for the Chinese version, and I assume those players can expect these in the very near future. As for ourselves, however, with all of the different content outlined and the fact that devs have said all future content additions will be free, we can very much look forward to everything in this video and much, much more once all of this has finally arrived. As for its exact order or how soon or late we can expect all of this, your guess would be as good as mine. I would assume that due to a lot of assets and framework having already been complete for the Chinese version, it should then be easier to implement it into the global version for ourselves, at least to some extent. I could be way off and we may have to wait just as long or longer than the Chinese player base has. However, one would assume we won't wait as long and could expect all of this on a slightly smaller timeline. But I guess we will just have to wait and see. What does seem very likely is we next receive the Bolang Sands region, along with the boss fights, world bosses, and all other additional content that comes with it. And for the most part, we can expect the devs to follow the main story with each new content addition, meaning I doubt they would add a later region and its story boss fights prior to first having added the previous ones. What we do know for sure is most, if not all of this content will arrive eventually, and so we have a good idea of what the next year or so is looking like for us all. And I, for one, am very excited. Anyway, that would be it for this video, folks. I'll be back soon with plenty more, and I do of course have a range of guide and news videos on the channel already, so do feel free to stop on by and check things out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, folks, and until next time, peace.